The ultimate Hall of Fame snub. If anyone should be in the Hall of Fame, it should be Vince McMahon. Controversial maybe, but without Vince McMahon, wrestling as we know it doesn't exist. Full stop. No WrestleMania, no Attitude Era, no Stone Cold cracking beers on TV or Hulk Hogan hulking up in the 80s. Vince changed the game. He bought the board, flipped the pieces, and told everyone this is sports entertainment. But here's the debate. Does that kind of impact erase the scandals? Or do the scandals erase the impact? If the Hall of Fame is supposed to honor the biggest names in wrestling history, then Vince is the name at the very top. He created the stage. He wrote the script. The problem is, Vince might be the most controversial figure wrestling has ever seen. For every highlight reel moment, there's a scandal lurking in the shadows. The steroid trials in the 90s, years of criticism over unsafe conditions for wrestlers, and most recently, the explosive allegations of sexual misconduct and hush money payouts that forced him to step down from his own company. The Hall is meant to be a celebration, a shiny plaque for sponsors, families, and fans to cheer. Vince's legacy is covered in barbed wire. You can't polish it without someone getting cut. And oh, the irony. Vince created the Hall of Fame, but will likely never walk onto its stage. He deserves it, no question. But WWE knows the second they induct him, all those scandals crawl right back into the spotlight. The man who built the empire might stay in the shadows of his own creation. The loose cannon left out. Brian Pillman was ahead of his time. So far ahead, in fact, that today's wrestling landscape looks like it could have been built in his image. And yet, WWE has still never given him a Hall of Fame spot. A man who influenced Austin, the Attitude Era, and the very way fans think about reality in wrestling, still missing. He started as Flyin' Brian in WCW, flipping and diving while most guys were still stomping and headlocking. He had the speed, the agility, and the charisma to stand out in an era that wasn't exactly built for daredevils. Teaming with Steve Austin as the Hollywood Blondes, he proved he could tell stories, build characters, and ooze charisma on the mic. Then came Loose Cannon. Pillman blurred the line between reality and fiction so effectively that no one knew what was real. Fans, wrestlers, promoters, everyone was on edge. He was unpredictable, uncontainable, and the perfect prototype for the Attitude Era, before Vince McMahon even knew what that was. Tragedy struck in 1997. Pillman died at just 35, at the peak of his powers. WWE's response? An on-air interview with his widow the very next night. Instead of honoring him, it felt exploitative, and the backlash was immediate. Fans, wrestlers, media, they all slammed it as one of the most tasteless moves in wrestling history. WWE doesn't want that spotlight back on them, which might explain why Pillman, innovator, pioneer, game changer, is still missing from the Hall of Fame. The truth is, Brian Pillman was a pioneer. He paved the way for the Attitude Era, for worked shoots, and for wrestlers who thrive on blurring reality. He should be in the Hall of Fame. But, as shocking as Pillman's snub is, some of the names coming later in this list face an even bigger battle to get a Hall of Fame call. The Hall of Fame that will never be. Owen Hart belongs in the Hall of Fame, but he'll likely never get there. Instead, his legacy exists in highlights and memories. And it's not about talent. Owen had it all. Technical mastery, charisma, a laundry list of classic matches. He was world championship material, even if WWE never gave him that final push. From his legendary feud with Bret to his run as the King of Hearts, Owen proved he could deliver in every role. Hero, villain, tag team star, singles sensation. Every match told a story. Every move was precise, and every crowd bought into his world. But the tragic events of Over the Edge 1999 changed everything. A stunt gone wrong, faulty equipment, and a life cut far too short. Owen's widow, Martha Hart, has been outspoken for decades, making it clear she will never allow WWE to honor him, stating, "I would never allow for Owen to be recognized for a company that is actually responsible for his death." That means no tribute shows, no merchandise, and definitely no Hall of Fame induction. WWE has quietly respected his legacy in other ways, but crossing Martha's wishes? That's probably never going to happen. And so that leaves the question, should the Hall of Fame honor Owen anyway, even against his family's wishes? Or is that one line WWE should never cross? Hit the comments. Let us know what you think. The ninth wonder, still waiting. Chyna was a game changer. Before her, women in WWE were mostly treated as eye candy or managers. Chyna walked in, flexed, and smashed that glass ceiling. Nearly 6 feet tall, built like a tank, and more than capable of hanging with the men, she did things no woman in WWE had ever done. First woman in the Royal Rumble, first woman in King of the Ring, and the only woman in history to hold the Intercontinental Championship. She was rewriting the rulebook. And sure, WWE inducted her as part of D-Generation X, But let's be honest, that's not enough. Chyna deserves a solo spot, not as somebody's sidekick, but as the trailblazer who kicked the door open for today's women's division. So why isn't she in already? Well, this is where WWE gets uncomfortable. After leaving wrestling, Chyna moved into adult films, something the company doesn't exactly want tied to its PG-friendly brand. Add in a messy departure, public struggles with addiction, a very strained relationship with WWE management, and suddenly, the ninth wonder of the world became the elephant in the room. But the truth is, none of that erases what she did in the ring. Without her, there's no blueprint for today's women headlining WrestleMania. The name WWE won't speak. Chris Benoit's name is erased from WWE history, but if you judged him on wrestling ability alone, Benoit is a slam dunk Hall of Famer. He was a master technician, a workhorse, and one of the most respected in-ring performers of his generation. From his early days in Japan, to his rise in WCW, to his world title victory at WrestleMania 20, Benoit's career was stacked with matches that fans still look back on as some of the best ever. His intensity, his precision, and his ability to tell a story in the ring were unmatched. But everything Benoit built in the ring was destroyed in 2007. That year, Benoit murdered his wife Nancy and their son Daniel before taking his own life. The wrestling world was shaken to its core, and the shadow of that event completely erased everything he accomplished. WWE immediately cut ties, pulled him from highlight reels, and have avoided any acknowledgement ever since. Chris Benoit will never enter the Hall of Fame. His in-ring brilliance is undeniable, but his legacy is untouchable, and fans are still left with an impossible question. How do you separate the wrestler from the man? And maybe the bigger question, should we separate them at all? The 5 count that never came. In the mid-80s, King Kong Bundy was a certified monster. 6 feet 4 inches, over 450 pounds, and moving like a freight train with no brakes. He squashed opponents in seconds and demanded 5-count pins just to prove his dominance. He was even handpicked to main event WrestleMania 2 against Hulk Hogan inside a steel cage. And in an era built on larger-than-life characters, he stood out as one of the few villains who looked like they might actually end Hulkamania. So, why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? Well, it's complicated. First, Bundy was part of the concussion lawsuit against WWE, a giant red flag for the company. And then, there's the personal grudge. Bundy believed he was owed money by Vince McMahon and that he was promised a world title run after putting Hogan over, a promise he claims was never kept. When WWE reached out years later to bring him back for an Undertaker nostalgia angle, Bundy's response was, reportedly, tell Vince to go F himself. Now, let's be real. Flipping your old boss might feel great in the moment, but if that boss also happens to control Hall of Fame inductions, yeah, that's like powerbombing your own chances straight through the mat. Bundy was a monster heel who helped define Hogan's era, but between lawsuits and grudges, the 5-count king may never get his Hall of Fame recognition. The Tag Team Titans left out. Demolition was WWE's answer to the Road Warriors, and for a while, they were even bigger than Hawk and Animal. Axe and Smash stormed in during the late 80s looking like post-apocalyptic brawlers straight out of Mad Max. Spiked gear, face paint, pounding music. But these guys dominated. Demolition held the tag team titles for 478 days straight, a record so ridiculous it stood for decades until the New Day finally broke it. And they did it without being flashy. No flips, no dives, no pretty boy appeal. Just 2 dudes who looked like they could smash through a brick wall and then beat up whoever built it. On paper, they're a no-brainer for the Hall of Fame, one of WWE's greatest tag teams ever. You might ask why they haven't been inducted. Lawsuits. Yep, the dreaded concussion lawsuits. Axe was part of the group of wrestlers who accused WWE of failing to protect talent from brain injuries. And if there's one thing that keeps your Hall of Fame invite from arriving in the mail, it's suing the company that runs it. And that's the real shame. Demolition was one of the best of their era. Tough, believable, and beloved. They deserve to stand alongside the greats. But until WWE gets over its grudges, Demolition's Hall of Fame music may never hit. Do you think WWE will ever put business grudges aside and give Demolition their Hall of Fame moment? The rumors for class of 2026 suggest they might. The Master and the Mystery. Sid Vicious had the look, the presence, and the resume of a Hall of Famer. He was huge, intimidating, and looked like the kind of guy you could build a wrestling company around. In WCW, he was a dominant monster heel. In WWE, he headlined WrestleMania twice, beat Shawn Michaels for the WWE Championship, and carried an aura that had crowds either booing or cheering him out of the building. His powerbomb was one of the most feared finishers of the 90s. On accomplishments alone, Sid checks every box. So why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? Because Sid was Sid, unpredictable. He clashed with management, walked out on companies, and played by his own rules. Then there's the infamous incident in WCW. Sid got into a fight with Arn Anderson that escalated so badly, both men ended up getting stabbed. Add to that his relatively short tenure at the very top in WWE. He was a main eventer, no doubt, but not for long stretches. WWE never fully embraced him as a long-term franchise player, more of a special attraction they could plug in when needed. And that's maybe why Sid, despite checking so many Hall of Fame boxes, is still on the outside. The innovator left in the shadows. Ask wrestlers who inspired them, and a surprising number will point to Dynamite Kid. He was the blueprint for the modern wrestler. Fast, technical, explosive. In the 80s, when most guys were lumbering giants, Dynamite was out there snapping suplexes, hitting diving headbutts, and moving with a precision fans weren't used to seeing. Teaming with Davey Boy Smith as the British Bulldogs, he helped redefine tag team wrestling, and his singles matches in Japan against Tiger Mask are still studied today as some of the best ever. But his legacy comes with a giant asterisk. Behind the curtain, Dynamite Kid had a reputation for being violent, cruel, and flat-out toxic. Stories of bullying and mean-spirited ribs followed him everywhere. He fought with wrestlers, terrorized locker rooms, and at home, things were even darker. He once pulled a gun on his wife in front of his children. That kind of baggage doesn't exactly fit WWE's Hall of Fame celebration vibe. On one hand, you've got an innovator who inspired Bret Hart, Chris Benoit, and countless others. On the other, you've got a man whose personal demons overshadowed his brilliance. And that's why Dynamite Kid sits outside the hall. WWE loves their neat, inspiring, family-friendly highlight reels. Dynamite's story? It's groundbreaking in the ring, but deeply uncomfortable outside of it. One thing's clear. If you've sued WWE, clashed with the McMahons, or dragged the company's name through the mud, you're probably not getting a Hall of Fame ring. But with Vince now out of the picture, could that finally change? Drop your picks. Who do you think will be the next big snub from the WWE Hall of Fame?